Okay, so here we go. This is transformative reprogramming of the mind. The original creator of Thought Pattern Management termed it Thought Pattern Management, but I think this set of words doesn't really um, define the transformative effect of what it is. So I've been like trying to use the similar acronym TPM, Transformative Repatterning of the Mind, but the official create is Thought Pattern Management. So TPM is based on the tools of neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis. And think of it as like the next evolution of these tools and skills. It takes it even further. So rather than just addressing a single issue at a time, it looks to teach the mind to do its own updates and automate positive behaviors. And as we get into learning about the mind, the brain, how it works, we start to recognize it's much more pliable. In fact, neuroscience in the last 15, 20 years has recognized they used to think that our brains were pretty set as far as the neurology, but they've recognized that the brain has an amazing ability to change its neurology and an amazing ability to create new neurons and to link up new neurons in new chains. And this is called neuroplasticity, that the brain can actually change and it can make those changes quickly. This is just a little tidbit of information that a single neuron, a brain cell, can have as many as 10,000 connections with other neurons. So if you think about the brain, it's somewhat like a neural net. And another way of thinking it is like a fisherman's net. And each of those little places where the net comes together is like a tie in that net. And our brain, if you take a fisherman's net and then just squish it up into a ball, now all of those connections are kind of there. So it gives you like a 3D model to think of the brain as that neural net. Now, I came to this field, like my own story, I have a longer story of coming to hypnosis. But in my own history, I was referred to a hypnotherapist for IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And after a few sessions, we uncovered an unresolved past trauma and we cleared up the trauma to a certain degree, and it cleared the IBS symptoms. And so I was really fascinated with this, and I went back to school to finish my degree in psychology in Portland, Oregon. And while I was there, found the hypnosis, wasn't really covered in our psychology courses, but along the way, found one training class, we were watching a video of the placebo effect that illustrates the power of the mind. And in that video, it showed a man undergoing brain surgery using no anesthesia, only hypnosis. And it it rocked my world. This is mind over matter. I was so excited and found a local school and went through NLP and hypnosis dual training. So from there, I started working as a hypnotherapist, NLP practitioner, and just started collecting as many trainings as I could. But I also found I still had reoccurring symptoms of PTSD, where I'd wake up in the middle of the night, underlying fears, nightmares, a cloud of distrust around men, and it was hard to shake. I would notice in some situations as especially more than others. But then I met Rich Adelot. He was a practitioner and a master trainer of TPM. And we went through the TPM session, and I not only found deeper relief, I felt like part of my mind could quiet down, that there just wasn't that anxiety pattern running. And it also gave my mind a tool that it could continue to kind of reset itself. And so I like to think of thought pattern management as a series of processes that create automations in the brain, that once the brain learns something, it can apply it really quickly. So over the years, since about 2008, I would say I've been using thought pattern management really consistently with my clients. In fact, it's had such a profound effect for my clients. I've made it foundational to the work that I do. And it kind of has a general cleanup. The first process that you'll learn today is the clear emotional history. It's like a general cleanup tool. Clients have said things like, the weight of my life has lifted. I just don't feel anxious anymore. And I'm going to share a couple of the testimonials. One, Sean Bergman, we were working with business coaching. We came up with a practical plan for business coaching. And then we went through thought pattern management. He said it was a life-changing experience. 1 hour really did change my life. So here's another example that I remember from a client. He came in, we did business coaching. He was looking at moving from his job to the private sector, to opening a business and running IT systems for businesses. So he came in, we mapped out his business, talked about who his ideal client was, created the whole strategic plan. And then I took him through thought pattern management, that first session, clearing up past negative emotional baggage. In that single session, after that, he came back in for the next session and he said, after that thought pattern management session, I realized that the entire business plan we mapped out is now moot because it was based on old beliefs about what I thought my capabilities were rather than my real capabilities. It's like a whole mental shift, and it kind of runs in as it elevates the baseline of well-being. And so because from that session, I started to realize, hey, why not just start with thought pattern management as if it's like a primer for the brain. Start there, clean up as much as we can, and then we can start adding the positives in, and the positives stick more effectively. Here's another client. She said, I had tried other approaches and I was tired of going to doctors and therapists. They were only talking about pills and prescription. She said, I wanted tools to really work. We worked on stress, and Holly helped me focus my energy on positive things and turn every negative issue in life into something full of wisdom and good positive energy. So this phrase right here, turning every negative thing into something positive and full of wisdom, it's a whole reframe for your mind. It gives you a new baseline for not only resetting your mind, but also reframing life into a much more positive, hopeful frame. And it works on a foundational level. We'll talk about that as we go through. She says, my life and future is so much brighter. I highly recommend her. And here's another to share. And this is also illustrating some of the capabilities of this single session that you will learn today. After thought pattern management, overall, I feel more positive, better able to handle things. Anxiety has decreased. I'm more able to cope and I'm getting better at letting go and trusting. I feel good, grounded, and excited. So because it works on a foundational level, it just elevates how we see life, how we see ourselves, and shifts that whole baseline perspective. Here's another one. This is what I find very common after running thought pattern management. Often clients come in for anxiety, and I hear it just changed how I perceive the world and how I perceive myself. After a single session, I felt my mind calm down. I didn't know I was carrying so much stress. The ruminating thoughts, replaying old conversations over and over just stopped. I found an inner calm, and oh, I just love the quiet space my mind now has. I had no idea I could just be quiet and still. So especially clients coming in with anxiety, they notice a shift. So what are the applications? And I wanted to kind of highlight this as a matrix. You see the person in the center, and then there's this whole matrix around the person. So think of it as like multiple layers of systems that are operating in our mind, body, spirit system. So we can address the mind patterns, and these are reoccurring thoughts, troublesome memories, especially emotions. Belief systems are also as part of those mind patterns. And of course, there's a lot of overlap between these. We can also address body patterns, habits of the body. For example, IBS, autoimmune habits, allergies. In fact, this is one of the concepts from NLP. I went to NLP health training, and they posed the question, is it that you have a disease, or is it that your body, your brain and body, is running a habit of the immune condition, the autoimmune condition? And so it can put it into a whole different workable frame. Emotional clearing, emotional patterns. Our mind and emotions are definitely connected. In fact, there is a bigger explanation about this, but we can kind of simplify the understanding of it to think of our emotions are created from the thoughts that we think. As we think certain thoughts, it then creates certain emotions. So if we're adjusting the quality of the thoughts that we are thinking, it will adjust the quality of the emotions that we are feeling. Genetic patterns. We look at often, well, there's new understanding coming to light also about genetics, that it used to be thought that your genetics are set and that you inherit the genes from your family, and then that's the cards that you are dealt. And so while we definitely recognize health conditions, issues that are passed through genetic lines, we also start to recognize that these are patterns, and the genetics, some of the research that is coming forward is talking and recognizing that genes can be turned on and genes can be turned off. And when we go through, when someone in our history line, our genetic history, goes through a trauma, that effects of that trauma can be passed down through the generations. And generational beliefs, we also inherit certain set of beliefs and ideas from our family system and how we were raised. So these also genetic patterns now also become more malleable than we once thought. And then also as a bonus, and today we'll get into talking about how past life patterns, we can apply some of the similar processes and scripting of thought pattern management, even to past lives. And we can do it quickly and even create, now sometimes with past lives, it looks like nothing happened. Like you can go have a past life experience and go through a process, and your mind creates a story, but it doesn't change your life. But with thought pattern management, we can put it into context of visiting the story, getting the mind to automate a learning, and then carrying that forward, and it will actually shift something. So I've helped a couple clients clear allergies by shifting the past life pattern. So that's very interesting, fascinating. That also has another discussion about what past lives are. We'll put that into context when we go into that segment as well. So here is, of course, understanding that thought pattern management, it's non-psychological. We do not diagnose, treat, or cure. It's also non-medical. However, a lot of the effects can be related or felt or elevated in our body system by shifting our mental patterns. Think of it as what your mind is running automatically. And it's also non-diagnostic. So of course, we're not diagnosing, treating, or cure illness or disease. It's not meant to substitute for proper professional medical or psychological services. So of course, that's the disclaimer there. So in the bigger context, what are the applications? So many applications once you learn this skill. One, I've made it foundational to the work that I do, and I find it acts somewhat like a primer. So in the first session, we clear up negative emotional history, and it's kind of if you were to paint a wall, you would come in with a big brush and get as much area as possible. And then you'd come back later and do the touch-up work of the corners and things like that. Because it has the capacity to elevate the mind and emotional state so much, it brings it back into baseline. Even if people have gone through difficult past history, it gives the mind a context for putting that into a more positive frame, that your mind can make sense of it. It also can increase motivation. We can help the mind resolve trauma at the unconscious level. We don't have to go into story or talk about the details or relive the event. We can resolve grief. We can overcome phobias, free anxiety and fears, increase self-esteem, how we experience ourselves, how we think about ourselves, overcoming addictions, creating new habits, depression. Is it depression or is it a brain habit of sadness? So these are some of the ways that we can recognize its applications. And from the first training, you'll get the whole process so you can take clients through that first level. So a little bit of background about Robert Fletcher. He was an administrator and educator for the Utah School of Deaf and Blind. And he was given the task of researching current methods for what really helps people move forward, helping the students with learning disabilities, but really looking for advanced strategies to help the mind step into achievement, excellence, and move forward. So it's not on here, but he became a teacher, an instructor for the speed reading course, Evelyn Wood, and was running the speed reading. With the skill of speed reading, then he was able to consume more research and methods and started just researching and researching. And that led him to certify as a master hypnotherapist in medical hypnosis, as an NLP practitioner, master practitioner, NLP trainer. So he went through all of the things, and also brain gym instructor. And what he found in helping and working with the students there, he helped them with learning disabilities by shifting how the mind was perceiving things. And from that work, he developed the body of work educating the mind. So instead of looking at, oh, kids have learning disabilities, he started to look at, well, that depends on how the mind is processing. So if we change how the mind is sorting and processing, it then changes their experience and they have a new experience with learning. And so from his methods, his work with children, then with educating the mind, he shifted to the private sector and started working with mentoring kids with disabilities into helping their brains learn themselves out of the disability. So they no longer had the learning difficulty. And from his methods he developed, he kind of distilled the 20 years of experience and learning, he developed it into thought pattern management. Rich Adelot is one of the key, he's a master trainer with thought pattern management, and he helped to develop and create the TPM materials that you also received. Okay, so here is any questions on that, go ahead and drop them into the chat. So the next segment, in understanding kind of the bigger overview, it's good to look at, thanks Holly for that check-in, to look at understanding the layers of the mind. And this is a model I like to use with my hypnosis clients in talking about how the mind works. And it's great as you explain it with your hypnosis clients. It's very common as hypnotists to use this. And it also helps give clients a visual model that they can understand, that they can relate to. So think of recognizing the image of an iceberg. Oh, I'll just explain it as I do with clients. So think of your mind as if it works in layers. A good example is like the image of an iceberg. As you picture the iceberg, the top part that you see above the water is a much smaller portion of your mind, and it represents our conscious mind. At the conscious level, we are logical, rational, and we know the right answers, right? But it's the bigger part of the mind, the 90% below the surface that we don't see. And it's that 90% that is actually driving that iceberg. So at the conscious level, that's where we are setting our goals. I want to lose weight. I want to feel good about myself. But it's the unconscious mind, subconscious mind, that is in charge of whatever is running automatically. So whether it's automatic habits like overeating or smoking, and those are the obvious habits in what we do, but there are other habits in what we think and how we feel, and it's not as obvious, but they're coded in that automatic mind, the unconscious mind. So in layman's terms, in the world at large, often people are using subconscious and unconscious interchangeably. So that's how I explain it to clients, and it gives them a kind of a touch point for understanding that. And then with thought pattern management, we can take it a step further. So again, conscious mind, logical, rational, linear thinking. And then in psychology, they describe the subconscious mind as its operating memory programs. So this is our cultural information. Thinking of the computer model, depending on the software that you upload to your computer, the software will cause your computer to run different things. So your brain is like the computer, but then whatever the past conditioning is, whatever your subconscious mind is running, it's running those habits and programs. And a lot of what gets written on our little computers as we're children is our family, cultural beliefs, habits, and patterns. So there's definitely that family imprints and also from the experiences. And then we can recognize that there's a deeper layer of the mind, the unconscious mind. Think of the unconscious mind, and I'll explain it and then we'll talk about the controversy here. The unconscious mind, think of it when you go to sleep at night, it's still operating. Think of your unconscious mind as the automatic part of your mind. I like to call it the automatic mind. It operates mental and physical systems, and it's still operating even when we are in sleep or in coma. So we can also recognize or deduce that the unconscious mind also affects health and body issues as well, because it's running the automatic processes. And then in thought pattern management, they recognize a deeper element called the structural, which relates to operating genetic functions, mental, physiological input and output. I don't particularly like the word structural, but I think there is a deeper level. I like to call it the grand intelligence that runs the matrix of who we are. So the controversy, if you talk to hypnotherapists and even especially like people outside of the US have a little different take on it. So often within the US, people are using subconscious and unconscious interchangeably. If you go out of, it's more the international folks that say, hey, subconscious is the part of your mind that we're accessing with hypnosis. Unconscious means asleep. And when people are going through hypnosis, they're not asleep. So granted, I understand that, but also it's useful to recognize that deeper layer. There is the subconscious, which was imprinted with family cultural patterns, our experiences growing up. And there's also a deeper layer operating mental, physical systems. And so as we go through thought pattern management, where we're working with the mind, we are actually working with the unconscious mind directly. That'll be more evident as we go through. And then there's also, it also creates the context for a spiritual frame. So whether or not you have a spiritual frame, but the spiritual frame would be kind of the water in which the iceberg exists. So that's also kind of a deeper discussion. So again, the computer model at the conscious level, this can be recognized as our personality self. Our personality self is based on our past history, but not only the past history, what we have deduced over time, not just that we went through that history, but our thoughts and feelings about the meanings of it, the ideas that our brain attached to it. So the subconscious then is the software running on the computer, the metaprograms and habits. And if we want to update what the computer is running, we can update the system. Another, to play on that computer model metaphor, the unconscious would be the coding that's operating the mental and physical systems. And then the structural would be the genetics, which I'm not sure how that, maybe genetics would be like the Wi-Fi in that model. So that gives a frame of reference. Again, thought pattern management is non-psychological, non-medical, non-diagnostic. We do not diagnose, treat, or cure. These processes are not meant to substitute for proper professional, medical, or psychological services. So with NLP background, neuro-linguistic programming was created from, I think it was University of Santa Cruz, mathematician Richard Bandler and John Grinder, a psychologist, got together and said, well, a lot of psychology is really focused on what's wrong with people, diagnosing people, recognizing the pathology, the psychopathology. But what about helping people move forward? What about helping people? What is the secret to success? Why do some people move forward and other people are stuck? And so they started looking at therapists at the time and looked at some are getting amazing results and others, therapist clients, were just kind of recirculating some of the same problems over and over. So they said, let's go ahead and study the people who are doing great work and getting amazing results because they must be doing something. Let's observe what they're doing, break it down so we can teach it to other people. And so they did. And they studied some great therapists at the time. Virginia Satir, one of the beginnings of internal family systems, and also Milton Erickson. He was a well-known psychiatrist, and hypnotherapist known for being able to tell someone a story and actually change an issue even in just a session, even without hypnosis. So from that, they developed the field of NLP, neuro-linguistic programming. And as they were looking at NLP, they started to notice that there are bigger patterns at play. So, for example, why are people, rather than taking personality at face value, they were starting to ask, why are some people really highly motivated this way and others are motivated that way? What is it within our mind that is directing what we see versus what we dismiss? So they started recognizing there's some bigger patterns of the mind. Meta, think of it as like umbrella or a higher level. They called this metaprograms of the mind. And they were asking the question, what is causing the mind to sort for some information and to dismiss other information? So this is, what is the mind sorting for? How is it processing? And what is the mind focusing on versus dismissing? So an example of metaprograms, for instance, some people are motivated toward a positive goal, and some people versus other people are motivated away from something that they don't want or don't like. We call that motivation toward or away from. So we're either motivated toward pleasure or away from pain. And that is recognized as part of what helps us make the shift. We're recognizing what we don't like and then getting our mind on board for what we do want. So that's one example. Another example is thinking of, are people motivated to recognize sameness or difference? Motivated is not the right word there, but some people are more wired. Here, that's a better explanation, to recognize things that are sameness, versus some people highlight more of what's different. This is something they actually use in advertising, and studies have found, I think this is more from John Grinder's work, that if something is absolutely new, it appeals to a part of the public, but only about 20% are difference oriented. So a person who their mind is focusing on what is different only is a category of about 20%. Whereas most of the public their mind is sorting for what is same or familiar. So for instance, when they unveil a new cereal on the market, the kind of advertising that hits the sameness category is new and improved, or the kind of marketing was like same cereal, but 20% more. So they're creating sameness, the product that you love, and then they're showing the value through what is extra. Now, difference oriented, and this is kind of an interesting thing, people who are drawn to hypnosis and NLP work I think there's a bigger percentage of people who are difference oriented or difference minded, because we're looking at what's different. Hypnosis is kind of also a different profession, a niche profession, same as NLP. So these are examples of what the mind is sorting for. I like to think of it as a filter of the mind. It's kind of like an umbrella. The higher layer is that umbrella of the mind, that the mind takes in certain information but dismisses others. There is the book, Understanding People, which highlights 44 of the metaprograms. So they're kind of listed out there. And I do have that as kind of like the top 10 metaprograms as a worksheet that you can kind of recognize what your mind is motivated to focus on versus dismiss. Now, there is Myers-Briggs was based on the metaprograms, and that's one of the personality tools that was developed from the understanding of these metaprograms. But even our sense of personality, often there is a controversy around personality because we tend to see it as set, this is who you are. But in recognizing that who we are expressing ourselves to be, is really a function of our mental programs. And when we start shifting those mental programs, it's very malleable. Are you a shy person, or was the shyness a mental block because of social anxiety, or imagining that people are judging you? And once that's removed, you can go from being a shy person to being an outgoing person, for example. Okay, so that's a little bit of recognizing this is the higher level at which we're working with thought pattern management. We're more or less addressing these metaprograms of the mind. Now, here is kind of background about understanding we call this presuppositions of processing. And Robert Fletcher came from that background of NLP, so some of the terminology is similar. So what are we presupposing? Who wrote the book? I don't have it on hand, but I will send it to you. The Understanding People. I want to say someone that comes to mind, but I don't want to make a mistake. So I'll send that to you. The presuppositions of processing, there are two pathways of change. One is the neurology, and this is thinking of those neurons in our brain are synced up, wired up in specific ways. And anytime we learn something new, our brain is creating a chain of neurons through our brain. So the first time that we learned to tie our shoes, it kind of took a lot of mental focus. We had to think about it. And as our brain was learning, it was linking up those neurons. Again, neurons can have as many as 10,000 connections with other neurons. So think of it as when we learn something new, the brain is linking up a physical pathway in the brain. And now each time we repeat that learning process, whether it's tying your shoes, driving the car, it strengthens those neurons to wire together. There's a little like rhyme says the neurons that fire together wire together. So the more that we repeat a pathway, it solidifies that pathway until it becomes a default, until the mind just runs the pattern automatically. And that's the structure of a habit. Now, there's also another method of change that doesn't require the neurology. And we would call that mind or consciousness. Think of consciousness as that which animates, directs, and informs the brain. So we recognize the brain by itself is not alive. It's kind of the consciousness, it's the higher consciousness that runs the mind. We have a thought, and it's the thought that we then direct. Our thoughts are not necessarily dependent on our brain neurology. Some of our thoughts are running by our neurology, but especially when we're choosing new thoughts, where does it come from? Well, we can use kind of that higher umbrella to recognize some level of consciousness, some level of higher intelligence that is causing the mind, the brain, to run different patterns. So here are the 5 core principles of thought pattern management. As Rich was working with Robert Fletcher and distilling down and identifying kind of what are these elements that can make such profound change so quickly, Rich started to help distill this and found that there's kind of 5 core elements that go into working with the mind at this level. The first is teaching the mind and recognizing we can teach the mind to do a function, and then the mind, once it learns it, it can then repeat the learning. The second is to ask the mind. So as we go through the script, you'll recognize that the languaging is very done in permissive language, that we're asking the mind, we're not telling it what to do. A little bit of telling, well, you'll see how that plays out. But we are asking permission. And what we're asking for is the ecology. Is this a good fit for the mind? Is it willing and able? And 3, we're creating inner agreement. Again, this is recognizing how these changes work for the person as a whole and paying attention to that. And then 4, creating alignment and harmonizing the learning. And then 5, we're automating what the mind has learned. And so as we go through, you'll especially recognize that from Thought Pattern Management Level 1, this first session, you'll recognize that the automation is actually fairly simple. But we want to make sure that we have that ecology, we have this agreement, alignment with the whole inner system, because there are multiple layers that are running the body, mind and the body. Okay, that's the overview. Do you have any questions or?
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Um, so my degree is in computer science,
Mm-hmm.
and so the way that I am like correlating what you said about the conscious, subconscious, unconscious, um, structural
Mm-hmm.
is the conscious is an application that has a UI,
Mm.
like Zoom. The
Yeah.
subconscious is that compiled code that's underneath it with all the libraries and scripts that you kind of use to create that program, the conscious program.
Mm-hmm.
The unconscious is really the kernel or the core operating system processes
Mm.
that are in the hardware. It's kind of like machine language, on, off, Boolean algebra kind of deal. And then the structural is really the hardware, the architecture, and the system limits. Yeah, because there are those layers in a computer as well.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, that gives a great model. I love that.
Hmm.
So, so as we kind of went through that first part, we kind of introduced some concepts, and especially like looking at how people change. One, there is like the habit level where people are learning something new and then you help them change that. But
Hmm.
also, people can learn something quickly. In an instant,
Yep.
something can be shifted. And you've probably also seen that in your experience, right?
Hmm. Yep. Even with
So
myself. Hmm.
even with yourself, yeah. So you
Hmm.
also kind of have a recognition of that element, kind of those two models
Yep.
of, and
Hmm.
then, um, well, yeah, I might add another to that because we can, by shifting what the mind is sorting for, that underlying filter, it shifts our experience, which also shifts our belief systems too. So
Hmm.
pretty fascinating how all of these layers work together and
Yeah, for sure.
interrelate as well.